Hey everybody, this is the Innovation Conversation, and I can't tell you how excited I am. We were just trying to figure out, this is Tom Furphy, you all know Tom. We were just trying to figure out how long it had been since we'd actually seen each other in person. I mean, we talk all the time, we see each other on Zoom.
And I said, it hasn't been that long, has it?
It's been over 2 years since we've actually been in the same room at the same time.
Crazy.
Before we start the Innovation Conversation, I'm going to apologize for the lighting. I know this is terrible, but right now we're at Groceryshop as we do this. We're sort of shuttling back and forth between National Grocers Association and Groceryshop in Vegas, and it's really hard to find a quiet place to do this and a place where we're not around other people, so we're both vaccinated. Now we don't have to wear masks, but so that's why. Well, I'll apologize for the production values now. But let's start by talking about, okay, I said, we're going back and forth between National Grocers Association and Groceryshop. Lots going on in both places. I don't know if you have the same reaction to this or not, but in some ways it seems to me that they are existing on different planets. And that's not to say one is better than the other,
right?
But that the independent sector seems to be living on a different planet than a lot of the retailers and certainly the vendors at Groceryshop, who just are looking at it. I mean, it's like a different industry you're talking about here than the industry you're talking about at, I think they're talking about at NGA.
Yeah, I mean, these Shop Talk and Groceryshop conferences have always been, quite forward-looking. I mean, you look at just the companies that were on stage today, from Shipt to DoorDash to, Rodney McMullen was on stage from Kroger, talking about the stuff that they're working on, and Chris Rupp from Albertsons Companies was on stage, and yeah, I mean, there's just I think there's a real kind of spirit of innovation here. There is, lots of becoming now quite reputable technology companies,
right,
that are here. Maybe 2, 3, 4 years ago, a lot of it was aspirational, but now you look at the logos that are on the booths, from the tech companies that are here, and I mean, this industry is starting to move. At least the folks on the Groceryshop side of it.
And there's a lot of areas in which there's even overlap, right? I mean, there's about, I don't know, half a dozen companies out there right now who are creating marketplaces, third-party marketplaces that are going to create endless aisles. And the fact that there's so many of them, I wonder to myself, I don't know what your reaction is to this. I wonder to myself, does having that many of them, is that good because it creates a sense of momentum, or is it bad because they're going to sort of be eating at a small pie?
I think the ultimate pie is pretty big, right? I mean, the pie being, anything you could buy from a grocery retailer, that's a pretty big pie.
Right.
Now but it's a relatively finite pie, and I think if you have a bunch of these, competitors out there doing fairly similar, activities, you have the total number of retailers that might do it. You divvy these guys up across those retailers. Some of them will be successful, some won't. One of the big retailers on stage yesterday here, that was on stage here 2 years ago, being Albertsons. Chris mentioned yesterday that they're out of the marketplace. Do you remember a couple of years ago when it was kind of a big announcement that Albertsons, they were one of the first ones to actually lean into it. But she said, when they looked at their customers and what their customers are looking for, they felt like their energy was better focused on the initiatives that they have on their plate, and not that.
Not to digress too much, but it's interesting because when I've talked to companies that are in the marketplace business, that are vendors who are trying to bring marketplaces to retailers, my reaction has always been, I think a marketplace is a good idea as long as it seems on brand and sort of like if you want to use it to create a greater depth of product in categories you already have, that makes sense. Or if you want to work in adjunct categories like say cookware,
logical, right? It's a logical extension.
Right. You're selling food. Okay, so we'll sell some food-related small appliances and cookware.
Yeah,
that makes sense to me. But to use that to say, oh, let's get into fashion because maybe we can sell some sweaters and make a little bit of profit.
Yeah.
To me, that makes no sense.
No, I agree. That doesn't make any sense. If you think about even like, Amazon and how Amazon gets into or has used the marketplace, which now sells way over half their goods, right? For them, it was all about, we want to be a service to our customers, and to the extent our customers are asking for things that we're not already carrying, we want to be able to carry that, through through Marketplace. Now, Amazon is an everything store, right? So
Right.
it's they have
Yeah.
a wide assortment category.
Adjunct is a much bigger thing.
Right,
for them
absolutely.
than
But
it
yeah,
is-
but they still though where they go with the marketplace, and then where they ultimately go with retail is in response to what their customers are asking
Right.
for. So if you're an existing retailer, where you have a value proposition to your customers, yeah, I think making those logical extensions,
Right.
to that can make a lot of sense. And the other thing that you hear in grocery retail particularly is this notion of an extended aisle, right? So and we do know that customers want choice.
Right.
In a physical store, and we've actually offered probably too much choice in a physical store, as you've talked
Right.
about. But online, where the incremental cost of carrying those SKUs is very low, and that because to render them digitally is cheap, to have just a few available in a facility is very cheap. So these marketplaces do allow you to offer that more extended tail, which when you're trying to serve as much of the purchase needs of a customer of yours as you can, having that robust assortment, that keeps them from going elsewhere, can be really valuable.
I hadn't thought about that before. A long tail for Amazon could be 2 million items. Let's pick a number, right?
Yep, or more. Yeah.
But the long tail for me as the customer may be 20 items.
Yeah.
Because I'm not aware. I'm only
Right.
being connected to and exposed to the products that are relevant to my experience, or to use a word that I still think is maybe the most important word in retailing to come out of the pandemic, which is essential.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. Well, you think about it. You could have a family recipe that calls for that 45th flavor of Jello. And a store is only going to carry so much of it.
Guacamole peach jello,
Right.
or whatever.
Yes.
Right.
But you have a family recipe that's been handed down. It's really important to you, and your retailer is certainly not going to waste the
Right.
shelf space on that thing. But if you can get that from your retailer, and that helps cement your loyalty to that retailer, the cost of the retailer to carry that SKU. Now they're not carrying it just for you, but for the few customers that want that's available in a marketplace, a lot of value
Right.
in that.
Yeah.
A lot of value. In that case, the punch is way above its own weight.
But let's go back to the original sort of where we started,
Okay.
which is the two worlds,
Mhm.
my sense of the two different worlds. Because when you go down to NGA, basically what happens is, I apologize for that sound. I have no idea what it is. It's either somebody's having a party or we're being invaded. I don't know.
I think way too loud.
So the question is though, for the retailers at NGA who are, Scott Moses talks about this all the time, right?
Mhm.
How poorly, Amazon has so much valuation
Right.
that it's able to borrow money in less than most countries.
Yes.
How do those, I don't know if I were an independent retailer, and this is not to say all independent
Yep.
retailers are this way. I could name lots of them that are really, really good with an enormous amount of vision,
Mhm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, I did a session where retailers were talking about, automation. And
Mhm.
do they want to, and they said,
Store
"I don't-"
automation.
Yeah, in-store automation. And, they were saying, listen, if I have to choose between in-store automation, I have to make choices. If I have to choose between in-store automation and putting a new produce case in my produce department and maybe painting the walls and doing a little work on the floor,
Mhm.
I'm doing the latter. Because I see that as being more customer facing, and I understand that.
Right.
But I can't help but think that is that's a problem going forward.
Right. I mean, I always come back, this is the Wegmans in me and the Amazon in me, but if you focus on your customer and what your value proposition is for that customer and what your customers, problems are that you're trying to solve, and you work backward into your organization to help drive your investment, strategies to how you're going to solve that, you may not determine that, a fresh paint on the walls. I mean, maybe it's important to your customers, and maybe fresh paint on the walls does make sense to them, right? But maybe auto replenishment matters to them. Maybe home delivery matters to them. I mean, the advantage of these store automation capabilities is that they lower your cost, right? So instead of having an hourly employee spending the time doing that, you can lower the cost on that, and then put your hourly employee, focus them on serving your customers more directly, right? So I mean, you're making these trade-offs, and I think, in traditional retail, kind of older school retail, if you will, there's so much art, in delivering the retail experience, and in the past, I think you could rely on gut. You could rely on what you think makes sense, and you could make these decisions and say, well, this technology is, a little too, fancy for me. I just want to focus on this because this is something I know is tried and true. Customers change, and so what's tried and true and historically worked doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work going forward, although it could.
And and right now there are a lot of partners out there, right? And then some are Cadillac partners, but some are, some are Chevy partners, and some are Ford partners, and sometimes the lower end partners
Sometimes
can be just as effective for what a smaller retailer.
Yeah, they could be exactly what you need. Absolutely.
But it's interesting you say that, you talk a little bit about how you have to know what the customer wants. I also think that sometimes retailers are resistant to the idea that you can actually teach the customer to want certain things, right? You can lead.
Yeah.
You don't always have to follow.
Well, I think the best retailers actually do take customers places that they don't even know exist. Right. So So when I say, focus on that customer and their needs, don't focus on like serving the exact needs as they exist today. Think about the solution that eliminates that need. Right, or solves that need in a way that they never would have expected. You get tremendous credit for that.
Yeah, I mean, the folks at Dorothy Lane Market, if they tasted some totally off the wall piece of produce that they thought was great, but nobody has asked for it in their right.
They're bringing it out.
But they're bringing it out, and they're going
to
to educate, and they're going to sample the hell out of it, and they're going to teach people to love it.
And they're going to get a ton of credit for that.
And absolutely. And even the people who don't like it are going to give them credit for having them brought them something new.
Yes.
Because that's on brand.
100%.
And it was interesting. I did have a couple of conversations with some retailers, and one retailer was talking to me about how during the pandemic, like everybody, they switched from a paper, a circular, to going digital, and said, and now we're still half digital and we're half print, and I was like, why did you go back?
What does that mean, half and half?
In other words, they're spending half their money on digital and half their money on print.
Okay.
But the point was, you
Why
had
go
already
back?
made the transition. Right?
Yeah.
Why would you go back? Well, we think customers want it, especially old customers. Anybody over 60. And I'm thinking, well, first of all, I'm over 60, and I never look at a circular. And second of all, you've already made the transition. You're never going to be able to do it that way again.
All the digital, if you looked at any of the demographic data on the customer groups that made the most strides forward digitally during the pandemic, it's 50 and up.
Right.
Like those age bands have converted.
You get these opportunities. It was like this was actually an opportunity to make a shift that was going to save you a lot of money and allow you to be a lot more effective. And you went backwards. It makes very little sense to me.
No.
Well, listen, we talk about innovation. I mean, innovation does require investment. It requires vision. And I worry about here's the one thing. Let me make one other different observation, which is that we have two different worlds here. I do think one of the things I bump into with people here, Groceryshop, in terms of vendors, it's not as bad as it used to be actually. But there's a lot of people here who have never been retailers, right?
Oh yeah.
You bring a lot. You bring so much credibility because you were a retailer before you got into this space. And I do think that that's the one if there's a war of the worlds.
You do see solutions looking for problems.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm always impressed when somebody says, "Oh yeah, I used to work at such and such a retailer," because it's like, okay, you're bringing a reality to this.
Yes. And I will say that you see that in talking to prospective clients when they know you were a retailer. They know you're there to sell them something, so they're of course guarded because you're there to sell them something. But you do have a level of cred when you were a retailer, and I think in that case, you're really just having a conversation with them. You're talking about their problems and opportunities, and if what you have is a match for them, great.
Well, that's an interesting lesson, because if retailers are talking to consumers about the consumer's problem, as opposed to just trying to sell them something, they're going to be a lot more effective. In the same way that in the technology community, if you're really focused on that retailer's problem as opposed to just trying to sell them something.
Totally, and there's not enough people in tech that understand retail well enough to actually have that conversation.
Well, there may be a bunch of independents out of business, out of work, and they can probably hire them. Bad joke. Anyway, that is it for this edition of the Innovation Conversation. As always, I'm so happy to see you.
Good to see you, brother. Good to see you.
And figure this bail bonding thing here. And we'll see you in 2 weeks, everybody. Take care. Thanks.
Thank you.